Hi, friends. I'm Chris Edwards, and welcome to Her Court here on the North Carolina Sports Network. Throughout the course of this basketball season, we would navigate our way through what's going on around the Atlantic Coast Conference in women's basketball and the state of North Carolina as a whole. There's a lot to get into when it comes to women's basketball in our state, particularly in the ACC, where a season ago, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State all hosted first and second round games at their respective institutions. All three of those teams picked to finish in the top four of the ACC this year, and they're all off to strong starts, playing some of the best competition in the entire country. On our debut episode, we'll check in with both the Wolfpack and the Tar Heels. We'll visit with the radio broadcaster for the University of North Carolina, Matt Krause, and we'll talk with the color analyst on the Wolfpack Sports Network, Ernie Myers. All that's coming up in our debut episode of Her Court. Stay tuned. We'll visit with Matt Krause coming up next.
Skip the traffic and ride straight to the hardwood with NC by Train. It's basketball season in the Triangle, and whether you're heading to see the Wolfpack, Blue Devils, or Tar Heels, you can leave the parking headaches behind. Enjoy comfortable seats, easy boarding, and fast, reliable service that gets you close to campus for every tip-off. Rivalry nights, conference showdowns, and all the magic of college hoops. NC by Train, the smarter, smoother way to get to the big games. Book your trip now at ncbytrain.org. Make it train.
Welcome back to Her Court. I'm Chris Edwards, and so happy to have with us for this segment and our opening show, Matt Krause, the voice of the Tar Heel women's basketball program. Matt, really appreciate your time today.
Chris, thanks so much for having me on. Always exciting talking ACC basketball with you.
Matt, as we're recording here just before Thanksgiving, the Tar Heels have won 3 of their first 4 games, with the only setback to a nationally ranked opponent in UCLA out in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. What do you make of Coach Banghart's team and the start this club has gotten off to this year?
You know, it's a very interesting roster makeup in Chapel Hill this year because on one hand, it's a program that brings back 8 players from last year and only lost 1 player with remaining eligibility to the transfer portal. And in 2025, that's a rarity. Yet, the team only brought back 2 starters and lost over half of its scoring and rebounding because they were so veteran dependent a year ago. So while there are a ton of familiar faces around the program, it's also a very new team that's relying on incoming transfers and freshmen for productivity. So as a result, it's a team that's coming together. And, you know, this year, the NCAA made those rule changes about public exhibitions. So Carolina was able to play a public exhibition game against South Carolina in Atlanta and fell to the Gamecocks by 9. So competitive game. But not only did they fall to them, the final score was 91 to 82. And if you've watched Carolina women's basketball in recent years, you know that Courtney Banghart hangs her hat on defense and that the team has been successful on the defensive end of the floor. And so to see Carolina put up that kind of offensive output, yes, it was an exhibition against South Carolina, it kind of set an interesting tone where you said, okay, maybe this group is going to be able to score a little bit more than in past years with this new core, and that the defense will be more of a work in progress. And there have been some ups and downs in the few games so far. Obviously, UCLA is a very, very talented team. I would not be shocked if they are in the Final Four in Phoenix, and certainly have a very strong chance to win the entire thing at the end of the year. Just a veteran Bruins team that's played a lot of basketball together, and Carolina hung with them, had the lead into the second half before UCLA just went on a run late third quarter to put the game away. And, you know, last part of your answer here, Carolina, after that setback, you know, could have gone a couple of different ways going into a game against Fairfield. And for those who don't know, Fairfield had lost 7 games over the last 2 seasons combined. And 2 of those 7 losses were in the NCAA tournament in the first round. So it's a very good program and a sneaky game to be playing on 2 days rest coming off your first loss of the season. And Carolina came out and they got punched in the mouth in the first quarter. Fairfield built the lead as great as 9. They led it, I believe, by 8 after the first quarter came to a close. And the Tar Heels were able to outscore them in the second quarter 26-6. They were able to turn the page not only from UCLA to the next game, but within that next game and pick up a good team victory against Fairfield.
You talk about the roster makeup. I remember Alyssa Usby kind of leading the charge for the Tar Heels last year. There are some familiar faces, as you pointed out, maybe playing bigger roles. India Navarre, Sierra Toomey, they come to mind. What do you make about some of these new individuals and the roles that they're having to play for Coach Banghart's team?
Yeah, among the returners that you mentioned, Navarre and Toomey are the two that have taken the largest leap, in my opinion. Navarre passes the eye test. I mean, she's a player who's been a defensive menace the last few years. Former North Carolina high school standout at Apex Friendship, across the country to now conference rival Stanford for her freshman year before transferring home. And her defense has always been her strength the last couple of years. But late last year started to come into her own scoring a little bit, and that's carried on this year. She just looks faster, looks more confident out there, especially in transition, and has let her athleticism kind of carry her game at both ends of the floor this year. And then Toomey looks like a completely different player. Very highly touted recruit coming out of the Scranton, Pennsylvania area a couple of years ago. Redshirted her freshman year, had some nagging injuries there. Last year, it was that first year in college, and it didn't quite take off in a statistical sense in game action. But this year, she looks more confident. She's been critical rebounding the basketball. She has double digit either points or rebounds every game that she's played this season. And last year didn't take a ton of free throw attempts, only had 12 of them, but only made 3. She exceeded her number of free throws made the entirety of last season in one game against Fairfield when she was 5 for 6 at the charity stripe. So it just looks a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident. And they've been surrounded with 2 incoming transfers. Nyla Harris is a familiar name if you've watched the league. She played at Louisville the last 3 seasons and has taken a bit of a step forward as a Tar Heel. And that's one of the reasons why she hit the portal, was to try and get a bigger role somewhere else. You know, she was a key player for Jeff Walls' teams the last few years, but was not the centerpiece of that Cardinal offense. And then Elina Arnisalo is a point guard from Finland who played for UCLA last year and got significant playing time, got 10 starts for the Bruins. But, we mentioned UCLA being a veteran team. Weirdly enough, UCLA brings back so much off of last year's team, but yet every single freshman on their roster from last year that was going to be a rising sophomore transferred out. So the Bruins prioritizing keeping that veteran talent. That puts Arnie Salo in the portal, and she's been a great pickup at Carolina, native of Finland, playing well for the Heels. And then among the freshman class, the headliner there, Nyla Brooks, is a former McDonald's All-American, the 5th such player to sign with the Heels in the Courtney Banghart era. Number 13 recruit by ESPN. Originally a Tennessee commit, reopened her recruiting when Kelly Harper was terminated there at Tennessee a couple of years ago, and signed with the Tar Heels. Brooks is athletic, stands 6'1", wing player. There are freshman moments for sure, but she is confident in a humble and eager manner. And I think that that's a piece that the Heels are going to benefit from for years to come.
Or what, Matt, has been the biggest surprise in the first month or so of the season?
I'm going to have to go with Sierra Toomey. It's simply the fact that Carolina's had some injury troubles with Blanca Thomas in the front court. So Thomas is another player who played in limited action off the bench last year as a true freshman. Tallest player on the team, standing at 6'5". And for a Carolina team that lost Maria Gokdang and Alyssa Usby to graduation, there was obviously a hole in the front court for the Heels. They got Nyla Harris. She's more a 4 player than a 5 if you're using the positional numbers there. And so that leaves, a lot to fill with the loss of Gokdang at the 5 spot. And Thomas has only played 1 game. And okay, so then that means it falls to Sierra Toomey, and Toomey's ability to improve year over year and embrace that role and be a go-to scoring option who can also step out and shoot the 3, which is certainly something that the Heels have not had at the 5 spot in recent years. And then her ability to rebound the ball. That was a big question mark, obviously, when you just simply lose that many rebounds as you did with Usby and Gokdang. So got to go with Toomey there.
Let's zoom out a little bit because it's still a challenging slate yet to come in the non-conference, not to mention the ACC that we'll get to in a minute. But Carolina still has games against South Dakota State, who's a really good mid-major program, Kansas State, who is a perennial power in the Big 12, Columbia, which is always a contender in the Ivy League, then has to go to Texas for the ACC-SEC Challenge. With the backdrop of this challenging non-conference, before you get into the rigors of ACC play, where are the biggest areas of growth that you still think Courtney Banghart's team can have?
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. You and I, obviously, since we follow this sport so closely, We know about Fairfield. We know about South Dakota State and Columbia, but the average fan may not. So that's what I've been trying to tell people. It's like, okay, you look at this slate and you only see three power conference teams on there, but sirens and flashing lights. There are some really, really quality programs, including the Jackrabbits and the Columbia Lions, who Carolina will see down in Cancun as part of the Cancun Challenge. But I think the Tar Heels need to work on putting a full 40 minutes together. You've seen flashes throughout the non-conference slate, going back to the South Carolina game in the exhibition, the UCLA game, where again it was a Carolina lead by a point with about 7.5 to go in the third quarter, and Carolina was within a point at halftime in that game against UCLA. They just couldn't put the full 40 together. Even the non-conference win against Elon, that turned out to be 71-37 in the second game of the year. You just look at the final score and you say, okay, Carolina was the better team. They had a talent advantage, and all that's true, and they rolled to victory. Well, not so much. It was 29-20 at halftime. I mean, it was a fairly low-scoring first half, and Carolina, as Coach Banghart said postgame, was just so frustrated on the offensive end that they ratcheted up the intensity on the defensive end, and that got the job done. But that's still a situation where you would like to see better execution over the full 40 minutes. And so if Carolina can continue taking those steps, now they've got a couple of games this week and then the 3 in Cancun. And then after that is Texas. So even though Texas is about 2 weeks away from when we're talking here, there's several games between now and then. And that's, I think, the next big national showcase is that trip to the Moody Center in early December.
Zooming out a little bit more and kind of focusing now on the whole league. Obviously, we know the three teams in our area, the ones that you and I cover, plus NC State, Duke, North Carolina, NC State. Last year had phenomenal seasons. All three teams hosted first and second round games. All three of those clubs picked to finish in the top of the ACC standings. What do you make of triangle basketball kind of as a whole, Matt, and then the ACC on a different level and just the depth of the conference?
The great news is that triangle basketball does not exist in a vacuum. It's the three-way relationship of the three schools with passionate fan bases, a history of success, and they've all bought in literally and figuratively to the sport over the last decade or so under their current head coaches. State was probably first under Coach Moore, and then Coach Banghart got to Carolina a year before Coach Lawson got to Duke, but they're on similar trajectories when you factor in the wrench that the pandemic threw into everything. Each school making this sport a priority makes the others better because they all want to beat their rivals. And so it's a great place to be if you're a basketball fan. And in all likelihood, I think the ACC is going to come down to those three teams this year. Something to always keep an eye out on is Carolina and Duke play each other twice. State plays each of those opponents, Carolina and Duke, once each, as their designated rival is Wake Forest. And so that factors into the top of the standings come year's end. In terms of other teams that are going to make some noise, it's an interesting year in the league. Notre Dame is obviously returning one of the best players in Hannah Hidalgo, not only in the conference, but in the entire nation. But with the exodus of talent around her, there's been some question marks with the Irish, and Michigan rolled over them in a non-conference game last weekend. Louisville was fairly non-competitive for most of the game against UConn in their season opener. They've started to click a little bit as the season's gone along. They beat Colorado in a non-league game, beat Clemson in a very early ACC game that was played last weekend. So Louisville's going to have some talent. I don't think that they're at the level that they were, say, the late 2010s and very early 2020s, but they are still a force to be reckoned with in the conference, could be in the conversation for the bye. And then in terms of contenders, I would close the conversation with a team that's the wild card of all wild cards, and that is, what do the Stanford Cardinal look like in year 2 under Kate Pay? And I think you can make a pretty sweeping referendum on what Stanford will be in this conference based off of what they do this year. Last year was the adjustment year. Year 1 without Coach Vanderveer. Year 1 traveling cross country 4 times to play these double road trips and figuring out how that all works. And then player wise, you lose Cameron Brink, you lose Kiki Iriafen, and so it's a new look Stanford team last year that didn't necessarily have the proven talent of the group that I know Duke played in a memorable non-conference game in Stanford's final year in the Pac-12. But Stanford brought in a great recruiting class. They're off to a good start this year. And so if they truly show up as a contender for the famed double bye when you get to the ACC tournament come early March, I think that's a sign that, okay, the Cardinal actually is going to be as competitive in this conference as they were in the old Pac-12. But if they continue to struggle, it's going to be hard to see them reaching back to those national heights in this conference in the future. Maybe unfair to put so much pressure on one year for one team, but it just kind of feels that way at Palo Alto.
No, I'm with you on that 100%. Although I am bummed we have to go to Atlanta for the ACC tournament, and we can't just go down the road to Greensboro. We're pretty spoiled, and I will be the first to admit that. But it should always be in Greensboro or Charlotte. But that's an aside. Okay, Matt, as I let you go, a couple thoughts. You've been to every ACC city now. Give me favorite non-triangle ACC city.
Favorite non-triangle ACC city? An easy answer is Coral Gables because the weather is often good, especially when you're going down in January. But I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give you a couple here. I'm going
Yeah,
to give
it's
you some
fine.
power rankings. Coral Gables is great. Louisville is a fun city. The arena being right downtown, it's always a great environment. You stay close to the arena typically. There's a lot to do in and around that area. So that's always a fun trip to go on, easy in and out for Louisville. And then one that you and I were able to go to for the first time last year. Really liked my time in Dallas at SMU.
Yeah.
Relatively easy trip, straight shot, beautiful campus, and that was a fun one. So among the newcomers, tip of the hat to Dallas, but always enjoy the weather in Coral Gables and always enjoy that atmosphere at the Yum Center too.
I am also a presidential historian, an amateur presidential historian. So I try to get to every presidential library, and they've got some good ones. And when you go to Austin, I've got some good spots for you in Austin too.
I can't wait to hear him.
Give me, and the folks listening and watching our podcast, Matt, how can they listen to you and your coverage of the Heels season long?
I tallied this up the other day in a conversation with somebody on our trip to Las Vegas. There are 7 different ways to listen to our broadcasts on the Tar Heel Sports Network. Terrestrially in the Triangle on 97.9 FM, 1360 AM WCHL. That's the flagship station for Carolina sports. GoHeels.com, the free Go app, the Varsity Network app from Learfield, as well as SiriusXM. Nearly all of our games are carried on satellite radio on SiriusXM's web streaming player. So a lot of different ways to find our broadcasts throughout the season.
The voice of the Tar Heels, Matt Krause, joining us. Matt, really appreciate the time today.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Stay with us. We'll have more of Her Court coming up in just a moment on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Are you juggling so many roles that none of them feel like you anymore? At Organize for Success, we help busy, multi-passionate leaders bring harmony back to every layer of life. Work, side projects, family, friends, even your passions and hobbies. For more than a decade, productivity expert Emily Parks has helped hundreds of clients clarify what truly matters and build the tools, systems, and habits to finally take action. If you're tired of feeling behind, visit organizeforsuccess.com and schedule your complimentary call today. Organize for Success. Get clear, get supported, get your time back.
Welcome back to Her Court, our inaugural episode here on the North Carolina Sports Network, and so happy to have with us Ernie Myers, the former player at NC State, now the analyst on the Wolfpack's radio broadcast to talk all things NC State women's basketball. Ernie, really appreciate the time today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. No problem.
Let's talk about the Wolfpack a little bit. Coach Moore's team off to a 3-2 start. The losses, though, have been to 2 really good teams in Southern California and TCU. What do you make of NC State so far after the first 5 games?
The loss to USC, and even Coach Moore said it still stings, but they played one of the toughest schedules in the country, with these ranked teams, and they're still trying to gel right now. I mean, they're not, last year's team, with the seniors. There's no seniors on this team. And, players are, still feeling each other out. Coach Moore even said, a lot of these is one pass and a shot, in the offense, trying to get the team to play more like a team instead of a team of individuals. So it's still a work in progress. They played last night against Coastal Carolina, and they were up 21, and then they only wound up winning by like 10. They let Coastal back in the game, and they didn't go at the 3-point line, and so it's just it's a maturation process. Last year we were 4-3 um, around this time or a little later. So and they all came together and wound up winning the conference and not losing at home. So I really believe that in time they have the talent. They have the talent to be one of the best teams in the ACC. And I think this is a down year for the ACC. A lot of teams just watched Boston College get beat by Harvard last night. But yeah, the ACC is up for grabs, and we've got the talent, the size, and they just have to come together and play more like a unit.
Let me ask you about a couple players specifically. I feel like Zoe Brooks has been at NC State for about 7 years. She was the ACC Freshman of the Year a couple years ago. What have you seen out of Brooks's game and the way that she's developed so far this year?
Well, right now she's trying to figure it out. I mean, now she's the number one on the scout.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's trying to stop her. She's on all these watch lists, and like you said, she was the All ACC and Rookie of the Year and all that kind of stuff. But she's trying to figure it out. Last night she had 13 points and 8 assists in the game against Coastal Carolina. She had a good game against USC. They lost the game, but she was really on her game. It's just trying to figure it out for her. I know she wants to lead by example, but I think she needs to be more vocal, more of a vocal leader on the team because she's been there the longest. She started last year, but without Sanaya and Isaiah and the glue Madison Hayes from last year, the lanes are kind of closing up a little. They were more of an outside shooting team last year. This year they're not shooting the ball that well from the perimeter or the three-point line so far early in this season.
How about Tilda Trieger? Where's been the biggest step that she's had so far this year?
I think she's stronger. I think she's more confident in her shot and her offense. She's running the court a little better. The European, the Swedish team that she was on over the summer helped develop her game, her confidence. She shoots over 51% from the field, along with shooting, 3-point shots, and she's our best 3-point shooter and our best perimeter shooter on the team so far. And I think she's been the most consistent player so far this season.
Who do you think's been the biggest surprise so far in the early part of this season for the Wolfpack?
The biggest surprise, I would say, the biggest surprise for me would be Maddie Cox.
Okay.
Maddie Cox, she started last night. She's been playing well. Coach says she's one of the most improved players on the team. And the way she played last night, she knocked down her first 4 shots. 3 of them were from 3-point range. And she just seems more confident in her game than she has been in the previous 2 years.
Couple thoughts and I'll let you go. Let me ask you about Triangle ACC women's basketball. I mean, last year, State, Duke, and North Carolina all hosted first and second round games. You feel like this is the epicenter for women's basketball here in our area, Ernie?
Oh, I believe so. I mean, Duke is they were picked to win the ACC this year. We were picked second, but they lost to West Virginia on the road, and they only had 5 players in the second half. So, but yeah, Carolina, and they have a great program over there. It's going to be a battle between the Triangle teams this year, I think, in the run for the ACC regular season title, and I think the championship. I think overall the ACC is kind of down, but these 3 Triangle teams are pretty tough, and I think it's going to be one of those teams that of the rank in the ACC is going to do well.
All right, Ernie, as I let you go, you, of course, played for Coach Valvano at NC State. What's your favorite or your best Coach V story that you can tell us?
He was just a character, a very funny guy, not only a coach, but I'm thinking of something memorable. when we were in the locker room before we went out, and you probably heard this story, he told everybody that we were going to hold the ball, but when in the locker room, he was like, "Hey man, we're gonna run him out of town. We're gonna shove him down." He's one of those guys that you'll run through a brick wall for him, man, and his enthusiasm for the game and his emotional attachment to the players, man. He's one of those guys that, that's a memorable moment for me when we were in the locker room right before the Houston game, and he just brought it all together. And we went out there, and for the first 5 minutes, we were just jacking up shots, and we were so amped up from the locker room speech. I mean, we had to calm down a little during the game.
That's awesome. Ernie, really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this, and look forward to seeing you sometime real soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.